My name is Angus. I'm a coastal engineer and coastal zone manager. I've been such since the early 1970s, and I've worked in all states of Australia. I've worked in Brunei, Dubai, Kuwait, Hong Kong and Indonesia, and on coastal engineering projects and coastal management projects. The coast's very important to me because I spent my early years in Broken Hill, which of course is the other side of the beach. And at Christmas time we used to come down to Kaialoa, a bit south of here, and we used to spend 5 or 6 weeks on the beach. And so that's my memories as a child, the contrast between Broken Hill and Kaialoa. It's not very hard to fall in love with the coast under those circumstances. Well, the thing that we need to do is, first of all, is to recognise that we can't really fight nature on the coast, because nature is far more powerful in the long term, and that's been illustrated by the seasons where we've had massive storms, such as in 1974 when there was tremendous loss of coastal areas and structures and infrastructure. It's all very well for us as scientists to understand what the problem is, but it is a real change to thinking, because if you're not working in harmony with nature, nature will overwhelm you. The coastal risks that we face are really associated with two principal things. One is storm erosion, and the other one is to do with the long-term recession of the coast. Now, much of the New South Wales coast is undergoing long-term recession, and this has been since the sea level rose to its current level about 6,000 years ago. There's been a developing imbalance and a sediment deficit on the coast, and so that's meant that the long-term trend has been for the coast to slowly move back. But on top of that, of course, then we have those intermittent major storms that cause significant cutback, where you can lose 20 or 30 metres of beach just over one single night. The best way we can deal with the coastal erosion is, first of all, not to build in areas that are likely to be affected by it. And so therefore planning setbacks become a very important part of any armament to deal with coastal management. But if the buildings are already there and if they need to be defended, then there are a number of options open. One of the most obvious ones, of course, is to build seawalls or rock revetments, and another one is nourishment. But if you build a rock wall, then quite often that will adversely affect the beach, which is the very reason the people are there. So the way we would normally try to do it is to build a rock wall and then nourish with sand to help bury the rock wall for most of the time, so the rock wall only becomes exposed during a major storm event. Building rock walls isn't cheap. Usually for the average property you're looking in the terms of maybe $200,000 or $300,000. But when you consider that most coastal properties nowadays are well over $1 million, and if you look at that $200,000 or $300,000 and you spread it out over time, it's a form of insurance. Now, you cannot get insurance, you cannot actually get purchased insurance for coastal erosion. So one way of purchasing insurance for coastal erosion is in fact to put the money into rock walls and beach nourishment. Any protection works is always a last resort. It's far better to see ahead and to plan so that you don't put buildings or assets and infrastructure in areas at risk or potentially at risk. So the studies to determine whether areas are in risk are really quite critical, that they're done up front. But unfortunately we have situations which we call legacy issues, where development has taken place in some of these areas over time, mainly because people didn't actually understand the issues at the time. And in those cases there's very little option other than to either protect or to withdraw. It is possible. We did have a situation up at Sheltering Palms, which is just north of Brunswick Heads, where the village was affected, a village of 17 houses, and that entire village was repurchased and relocated. I think one of the most important things when we start to talk about protection or changes to the coastline and how we're going to manage it is that we find out who are going to be the beneficiaries from what's going to occur. So that, for example, if properties are to be protected by rock walls, then really the major beneficiary is the people whose properties are protected. However, other beneficiaries can be the people using the beach if you include nourishment with it. So it becomes a rather complex issue of working out what things are going to cost to manage a beach in a particular way, but then who are likely to be the beneficiaries. There's a number of funding options. Obviously some of it can be through direct payments by people who are affected. There's the funding directly from local government, for example, because keeping the beach in a healthy state is good not only from a social point of view but also for the commercial businesses that depend on the coastal culture, what's sometimes called the saltwater economy. So there's funding there. Unfortunately at this point in time there's not much federal funding, but there are state grant funds that are available for specific projects. I think Council's priority should be to separate greenfields development from brownfields development. So in other words, when you're looking at any new development, new releases, to look at the issues such as appropriate planning, setbacks, etc. When it comes to brownfields development, and this is the legacy areas I was talking about earlier, the Council really has to look at how it is going to manage those areas. If they are already fairly well developed, and there's infill development or people want to redevelop, then the Council needs to come up with a policy for managing that development in such a way that the risk is managed. And this is about not risk avoidance. You're not going to ever avoid the risk, but you can manage the risk. And really that depends on the individual circumstances, the individual location, as to how that's best done. And that's one of the reasons why councils need to and do undertake extensive scientific studies. The one thing that Council really needs to be aware of is this dynamic and ambulatory nature of the coast. As I have said, we tend to have always assumed that the beach is where it always has been, but that's not the case. And so Council really needs to build that into their entire thinking about how they approach both new development and existing development.